The first thing that was being covered is selecting a range of adjacent cells, okay? And how that's done, it's you simply click and drag from cell A4, you drag down to D10. So I'm going to quickly show you how that's done. Again, you can also do the same using your own computers as well. Okay, so A4 to D10, I simply click, and with my mouse pointer, I drag down, 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 like that. That is how you select A4 to D10. Okay. Did we do this last week or not? Do you remember? Leah, I think your network was the best. Did we cover this at all? If you don't remember, most probably the issue was just to do with network connectivity. Right.
Yeah, I don't remember. So.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So if you don't remember this, then this is a good point to start on for today's lesson. I thought we had covered it, but that's not an issue. Please confirm with me that you've received this file, selection file. On the chat section, I've shared it. Have you all got access to the file selection?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we want to do for the first part of our lesson is we want to go over these concepts. Okay. Here we are. So the first thing we've just done there, we've done selecting a range of cells. Okay. We've done selecting a range of cells. That's the first thing that we've done. The next one, the next section in this textbook is looking at selecting a range of non-adjacent cells. Okay. And say, for example, we want to select cells A4 to A10. Okay. And then we also want to select a cell range C4 to C10. So we are being told what to do there, and the button that we use is the control button. So I'll again demonstrate this, and then I'm going to ask you to do those two things as well for yourself. So I select cell C4, A4 to A10, for example. Then I press the control button on my keyboard, and then I click on cell C4. And then if I drag down, you'll notice there that I've now selected two cell ranges. And what I had to do there is I used my mouse and I used a keyboard button, CTRL, or the control button. And it is possible, as is shown in the textbook there, to select non-adjacent. When we talk about adjacent, it's a cell that's one next to the other. Okay, so I want you to practice those two things that I've just done now. And as we usually do, I normally ask you to also participate in the lesson by posting on our WhatsApp chat group so that I can see that you've got access to the selection textbook, as well as you are able to also do the two things that I've demonstrated. Okay, so what you need to just do very quickly is just to work through the first two little examples and just show me that you are able to select a cell and select a range of cells. The first one is cells which are next to each other. And then the second is cells which are non-adjacent. I demonstrated how to do both of those things. So what we want to do essentially is just go through this topic in the textbook. Nothing difficult, nothing challenging. We just want to be sure that we know how to do the different selection techniques. So let's go ahead and carry on. So what we've done so far, we selected two non-adjacent rows. The next thing we want to do, we want to select a row. So we want to click on row heading 4. Okay, so if we can do this together. Row heading number 4, to select that, it's simply, we can just click on the cell there, like I've done. Okay. And you can easily select anything that you need, like I've just done, selecting that row. Okay, I'll ask you to do the same, and I'll be demonstrating as well and asking you to do the same on your computers. Okay. I can also click on row heading 4 and then drag down to row number 10. Okay, and I'll demonstrate that. So if I've clicked on row heading number 4 there, and I've selected that whole row. If I want to select a couple of rows, I click on row heading number 4, and then if I click drag and go down, okay, I can also select a number of rows which are next to each other, like I've just demonstrated there, and as is explained in the textbook as well. Okay, so I'll ask you, as we just go through these different sections, to also do this practical selection exercise, so that you can be sure and confident that you know how to do these different things. Again, nothing difficult at the moment. We can also select a range of non-adjacent rows as well. Okay, so say I go back and I select row 4, and if I press the control button, I can select row number 6 as well. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to keep sending me on WhatsApp, because you've already sent me some information and I can tell that you're following. So I would select row 4 there, control, then click. That allows me to select 2 rows which are not next to each other or non-adjacent. Okay. If there are any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, it's mostly straightforward and quite easy to follow. Okay. Again, you can select an entire column, as well as selecting a number of columns which are next to each other. I'll quickly do that and demonstrate it there. And if I want to select a couple of columns which are next to each other, I drag across like that. Okay.
So that all we're doing, we're just selecting multiple columns and rows.
All we are doing is we are going through this chapter, and what this chapter is doing is it's teaching us to do the selection of different rows and columns. Okay, it's a short chapter, and I think the last thing is to select non-adjacent rows, and then we want to move on to the next chapter, which is working with columns and rows. Is that okay? Why do you need to know how to do this? As we move and cover topics to come, you will sometimes need to work with your spreadsheets and be able to select certain rows. You'll need to be able to select certain columns. Sometimes you may need to delete, you may need to edit, you may need to add. So the selecting and knowing how to select, it's an important skill, if you, particularly for the topics that we want to be able to do a little bit later on. It's just to make sure that you're comfortable with it. It's nothing difficult at all. And I'm sure from your question, it's something that you're finding very easy, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Right. So let's finish with selecting 2 non-adjacent rows, and then we can move on to the next chapter. So selecting non-adjacent rows, you select, you use the control button, and then you can select another row. Okay. If there are any questions, you let me know. Otherwise, I think chapter 4, lesson 4, I think we are done. Then there is an assignment which you will need to do that will be due at the end of this week. Perhaps I can quickly just go to the assignment so that you see where we are going and what you need to be able to do. There are two sets of questions that you will need to work through and answer. The first one obviously being the selection that we've just been doing now. And then the next one will be, okay, Sinead has just sent me a message. Okay, yeah, no, it's fine. It's just a network issue. That's okay. Okay. Just want to see if I've got the right assignment there. Okay. 4. Let's double check. Okay. The assignment you are supposed to work through is this one. Okay, it looks like I might have repeated this. Did I repeat last week's assignment by mistake? I think I may have saved it, the wrong assignment. The assignment you need to do this, the files are correct. It's XXL and X columns and rows. That's the file you need to work on. And the questions for your assignment are at the end of the chapter. It looks like I might have uploaded a wrong Word document. So just be sure that at the end of the chapter we've just done, this is what you need to be able to work through. Okay. And at the end of the next chapter is another assignment, which is looking at working with columns and rows. We're going to discuss this shortly. We will start today and we will continue in our next lesson. The assignment you will need to be able to work on is at the end of this next chapter. And these are the things that you will need to answer. Okay. So it's 2 files you will need to work on. Both files are uploaded. What I think I did, I beg your pardon here. It says work week 4, selection and working with files, but it's the wrong questions. I will need to just correct that. I hadn't noticed. This will be the second part. Is going to be 2 parts. Your assignment will be based on 2 parts. The first one being that of selection, the second one being that of working with columns and rows. Okay. We've been learning for the last about 30 minutes or so. Our lesson is about 45 minutes long, which is okay. So we can get started on the next chapter, which again is teaching us some more skills that help us to be able to work with spreadsheets, work with workbooks. And here, what we want to be able to do, now that we know how to select columns and rows, we will now develop a couple of new skills. We want to learn how to adjust column width. We want to learn how to adjust row height, how to automatically adjust columns, how to insert columns and rows, how to delete columns and rows, how to freeze and unfreeze columns and rows. Okay, so we can move on to lesson number 5, and there is a file that I will need to quickly share with you called columns and rows, and I'll put that file into the chat section. Okay, Sinead is having network issues and can't hear me, so that's fine. We are recording this lesson, so just want to ask her to try and follow. Okay, that's fine. So let me share with you this file called columns and rows now in the chat section, because that's the file that you need to work with. right? Columns and rows, this one. Please just confirm with me that you've received it. I've sent it. Okay, so we're going to just begin with, maybe I'll just touch on the first thing in the textbook, and then in our next lesson, we'll be able to continue with this. Then you can work on your assignment. Obviously, during the lesson, I'm going through with you, and I'm not rushing through any of the material to make sure that you have a good grasp of the different skills and the different concepts. What we want to learn, as I've indicated, the first thing we will cover today, and then we can move on to the last few items in our next lesson, and then you can have work on your assignment. We want to work with the file called columns and rows, which we have opened. So let me just do that. I've got it here open in the spreadsheet here, but it's easier for me to use Microsoft Excel. It's easier for me to do that because some of the things in the spreadsheet, the Google Sheets, it's the same sort of stuff. It's just easier for me to do this because the resource that I've shared with you is developing how to do these things using Microsoft Excel. I hope that makes sense. So I just want to reopen the same folder. Okay. Columns and rows, there we are. Right, there we go. So the first thing that we are being asked to do now, in our previous chapter, we were looking at how to select cells which are next to each other, okay? Or cells which are adjacent. That's the other way of saying it. So the first task that we want to quickly do together as we come and start rounding up, this is to give you an advantage. You can actually go and read ahead and finish this off, and you can actually then work on your assignment as well, because it's fairly straightforward. So we've been asked to select columns D through to G, and what we are being asked to do is to change the column width of that cell range so that we display 11. Okay, so let's quickly go there. Looking for columns and rows. This is columns and rows. So now we can select these 4 columns. We now know how to do that. We click and then we drag. Christian, to answer your question, you are asking me to say, is this all that we're going to be doing? We were first making sure you're comfortable with the skill. Now we are going to see how can we use the skill of selecting to do other things. Okay. So over here, you will notice that in these cells, I can see the detail which are in the columns because the columns are wide enough. When you see these hashtag symbols in a spreadsheet, all it means is there's some information in those cells, but I can't see that information because the columns are too narrow. So the first thing that we're going to do now, we're going to click, and then we want to drag so that we adjust the width to be 11. So there is 11. And when I do that, the information which was in those cells, D, E, F, and G, it's now visible. Does that help?
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So what I want you to do now, like I've explained, the assignment, it's at the end of the chapter from the textbook. The textbook is there. The textbook is there in your resource. Okay. It's the ICDL textbook that I've had open, and that is what I've been using. There is an assignment that's there at the end of the 2 chapters that we were looking at. Okay. You can, we were looking at lesson 4 and lesson 5. Lesson 4 was selection. Lesson 5 was working with columns and rows. At the end of each of those chapters, there are some questions that I would want you to do. I will need to just straight after this lesson quickly edit your assignment so that I post the correct questions for you. Otherwise, what have we looked at today? We were looking at selection techniques, and we were looking at a file called selection. And from that file called selection, we did a couple of things. The first thing we did is we learned to just select adjacent cells. We went on to select non-adjacent cells by using the control button, clicking and dragging down, and we learned that. We also selected columns. We learned how to select columns which are next to each other by clicking and dragging. Okay. It's not cooperating very much with me at the moment. It's asking me to move. Let me use this file here. That's why I prefer using this. It's a little bit easier for me. You can select a column. You can select columns that are next to each other. You can select columns which are not next to each other by using the control button. Same with rows. You can select rows which are next to each other. You can select rows which are not next to each other by using the control button. And those are the skills that we were looking at and laying a foundation. We then moved on to one more exercise, which is in the following chapter, which we will continue in our next lesson, where we were looking at selecting cells which were next to each other, which had some detail in them, which you couldn't see clearly. And then we learned that once you've selected them, you can adjust the column widths to a size that you want. And these are the things that we will be developing. Before I end the lesson, I just want to find out if there are any specific questions. Otherwise, for today's lesson, we are done. Sinead, I'll try and reach out to her maybe on WhatsApp because she's been having some network issues. Hopefully she won't fall behind. Are there any questions? Otherwise, for today's lesson, we are done with what I wanted us to cover.
No questions from here, sir.
Okay, Christian, are we good?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. As usual, we are building from what we are covering. If you have any questions regarding the assignment or anything else, I'm more than happy, if you've understood, for you to read ahead to carry on with the assignment question, no problem. Otherwise, I'll then see you come Wednesday. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely day. We'll see you.